Welcome to this webinar on disinformation and the pandemic. It's great to see everyone here. Whether it's unverified, misleading, or false information, and these are distinctions made by Craig Silverman, one of our speakers in this webinar, it's a major issue for public safety and trust, as well as for journalists. Reporters and their editors obviously have a responsibility to publish accurate information. But checking out misinformation is increasingly part of the investigative process and can take a reporter to a good story. These are some of the topics we're going to be talking about today. I'll introduce the two speakers in a moment, but just for those of you joining us for the first time, a little bit of information about the Global Investigative Journalism Network. GIJN is the largest global network of nonprofit investigative journalist organizations in the world. We have 184 member organizations in 77 countries. But we work with journalists everywhere, whether they're commercial, nonprofit, or freelancers. We work with them all, and we were established to connect and support them. Do check out our website. So now on to our speakers, and I'm truly delighted that we've been joined today by two very experienced journalists who will each talk for around 12 to 15 minutes, and then we'll take questions from the audience, of course. First up, Craig Silverman is an award-winning journalist and one of the world's leading experts on online information, misinformation, fake news, and content verification. He is the media editor of BuzzFeed News, where he covers platforms, online misinformation, and media manipulation. Craig has won numerous awards and edited the Verification Handbook and the Verification Handbook for Investigative Reporting. He is also author of the book Mafia Boy. We're delighted to have Craig with us today. And also, Jose Antonio Lima has worked in media both in Brazil and internationally, and is now assistant editor at Comprova, a nonprofit that brings together journalists from 28 media companies in Brazil to investigate misleading and false content. Comprova is coordinated by the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism and was set up during the 2018 Brazilian election to encourage collaborative investigation of misinformation. It currently focuses on COVID-19 crisis, which is enormous in Brazil. So once we hear from our two speakers, we would very much like to hear from you in the audience, and please send your written questions and messages in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. You can also send them in Russian and Arabic. We'll translate them and pass them back to our speakers. When the speakers are finished, my GIJN colleague Eunice Au will appear on screen to moderate the questions. Please note that we will share Craig and Jose's presentations in the chat box and also in the follow-up email after this webinar. Finally, please note that we'll be recording this session and posting it later on YouTube. So without further ado, let's start. Craig Silverman, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you also to the interpreters who are going to be working very hard to get this into multiple languages. So let me get my screen shared here and pull up the slides. I'm going to walk you through a case study of an investigation I did that was related to COVID-19 and started with some false information being posted on Facebook, and ended up revealing a network of Facebook pages and a network of online stores connected to one company that were ripping people off, making false claims about masks and related things. So this presentation, I'm going to focus a lot on network analysis, meaning starting with one, in this case, one piece of content, and then building that out to figure who is behind that content, what other assets do they have, in this case, Facebook pages and online stores, and pulling that all together to try and get a clear picture of the operation behind just that single piece of content. And Jose has a really great dive into doing some content verification. So hopefully it's a good combination for you. So we'll talk a little bit about a focus on a Facebook page. That's where this piece of content started. So how do we analyze a Facebook page? What are the things you want to look at? What is the information that Facebook is disclosing? And how do you then take that off of the platform and start to connect it together to build that network? And then we're going to do a deeper dive on kind of that building out a network, that network analysis, where you start with, in this case, it's one Facebook page and one URL on a Facebook page. And how do you take that and using online searches and other approaches, build that out to really get a sense of what's actually going on. And then in the end, I'll recap some of those tips as well. All right, so let's take a look at that piece of content. So we have this Facebook page, and I'm just going to play a little bit of this video that's attached to it. And so you can get a sense of what this was advertising. So as you can see, it's a mask ad. They're citing some stats, which are not true. They make a claim there is no CDC Surgeon General. And then they make a big claim, which is the only mask in the world that can fully protect you from bacteria and viruses. Now that is not only a false claim, but a really dangerous one, because if people think wearing a mask fully protects them from a virus, maybe they're going to engage in some other risky behavior. So when I was alerted to this particular video, and obviously they're selling this mask, I wanted to dig in further. So let's take a look at what we have here. There's actually a lot of information on this page that we can gather and start to go from. And the first thing here is, of course, we have a web address. We have a URL, which takes us to an online store where they were selling the mask. And a URL is a great thing to be able to look into. And just to give you a sense of, not only do you want to visit that URL, of course, and see what's going on and look at that website and do they say who's running it. In this case, they didn't. It was a Shopify store set up with a template, done really quickly and hastily. So we needed to kind of get a little bit deeper on this. And so one of the things that I did was, in addition to visiting that URL, I also did a Google search where I put the URL in quotation marks, because this gives me a sense of the content that Google, in this case, has indexed about this URL. So it's information about the URL, citations of the URL, content that Google has indexed, rather than just going to the site itself. And one of the things that stands out on this first page of results, and I would encourage you to not just stay on the first page of results, but in this case, we have some interesting information here. We see that there is a company name being cited in a PayPal community post. And if you recall, on that Facebook page, they were advertising that you could buy this mask using PayPal. So we know that they are payment processing using PayPal. We see that on a PayPal community site, people are complaining about having bought a mask and it wasn't delivered, and they're citing a company name here. They're citing the website that we have, and they're citing a company called Zestat. So this is a good first lead, just from us not just visiting that URL, but also looking for mentions of that URL. And you can also, take a URL, search it on Twitter, search it elsewhere, see what people are saying about it. But right now, the important piece of information is that Zestat appears to be the company selling the mask. Now let's go back to our page here. So what else do we see? That section on the left that I've highlighted is a sidebar that's on every Facebook page. And one thing I want to note that you may or may not have noticed so far about Facebook is that there are now two designs for Facebook. There is this design, which is the old design, and Facebook is slowly rolling out a new design. You may have been offered to use it for your profile. And if you have accepted that, the good news is you can still kind of switch between the old Facebook design and the new Facebook design. And the reason that's good is that the information displayed is actually kind of different between these two. So if you are investigating on Facebook a lot, you need to be aware that in some cases you're going to need to switch between the old design and the new design. And there's some easy advice online about how to switch between those. It's pretty obvious. In this case, on the old page design, we have home, reviews, about, photos, posts, and community. You want to visit all of these tabs. Okay, the about page may have another URL. It may have an email address, a phone number. The community page will have posts where people have tagged this page. So sometimes, for example, if people are upset, they'll tag a page and say, oh, I can't believe this page ripped me off. I bought a mask from them. Reviews, similar information. If they're selling a product, they may have good reviews, they may have bad reviews. That's a great place to start finding customers, because that can provide you more information. So always visit all of the sidebar elements there. And then we also see here that Facebook has an automated system for recommending related pages to the one you're on. And I have found in investigations that there are times when the page I'm looking at doesn't disclose who's behind it. And I can't figure out, how many other pages maybe they're running. But Facebook itself, because it collects a lot of information that we can't see about these pages, has actually recommended me pages that turned out to have been connected. So I always recommend you look at the related pages that Facebook is automatically recommending. Visit those, see if they're connected. And then the last thing to highlight here is this wonderful thing that Facebook has started doing, which is offering you more information in this page transparency box. This is available on every Facebook page, but you're going to get varying degrees of information in it. Sometimes you're really lucky, and like this one, they're telling us who the confirmed page owner is, or sometimes there's not going to be anything like that. And just to give you a sense, this is what it looks like when you click on the page transparency link. In this case, we've got a confirmed page owner, but of course, it's a bit of a red flag because we see customers saying they bought a mask from Zest Ads, but the page owner is a different company. That company is apparently in the United States, but luckily we get a phone number. We can see when the page was created. We can see where the people who manage the page are located. In this case, it's Spain. So that's kind of another red flag. Why is an American company with this page managing it with one person from Spain? And then if it was running ads at this moment, we'd be able to go and view those. So already we've actually gathered a lot of information in what would take maybe just a few minutes. We've got two companies. We know it's a relatively recently created page. We've got a connection to Spain. We've got upset customers. So there's a lot of avenues that we can take to go down. And so just to recap that quickly, when you're looking at a Facebook page, and this can be true for other platforms as well. I know we have people from around the world. Facebook is very global, but you may have other networks you're looking at as well. Are there URLs being promoted? Are they being listed as sort of URLs linked to the page itself, as well as URLs that they are sharing as posts? Is there other contact information? When you look at the reviews or the community section, or even the comments on the posts, are there people there expressing, unhappiness that they've maybe been ripped off or something like that? That can give you more information. You can look at the related pages being suggested, as I mentioned. And then the other kind of final tip here is Facebook does collect the photos that a page has been sharing in one tab. I always go to the profile photo and to the background photo, and I look at the earliest ones that page uploaded. So often when you create a page, you put a profile pic in right away. If I'm trying to figure out who's running a page and it's not being disclosed, sometimes the very first people who like or commented on a profile image or on a background image end up being connected to the page. So that's a thing you want to keep in mind. Those earliest images, those earliest profile photos, go and look at them, see who's interacting with them. They often don't have a lot of likes or comments. That may be a clue of someone who actually was involved with the page early on or knew about it very early on. So that's our kind of Facebook page piece. And you can repeat that again and again and again every time you look at a Facebook page. But I do want to emphasize that there is a lot of info there on a social media profile, on a social media page, and you need to really think about looking at everything and making sure that you haven't missed any clues that might be there. Okay, so we have our dilemma. We have two companies, right? We've got the one listed as the official page owner. We've got the one that customers are saying sold them the mask. When we search, we can add the word masks to the companies, for example, to narrow it down a little bit and see what people say. And we do see the American company there on the left was involved in producing PPE. So that suggests maybe they are selling masks. But when we look at the search we get with Zest Ads, we're just inundated with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of online posts and complaints about this company ripping them off and selling masks. And so for now, let's focus on Zest Ads. And the thing I've highlighted here is the Facebook group where people have talked about buying masks from Zest Ads. A Facebook group is a great place where people might congregate, in this case, to talk about being scammed. And of course, that means we have potentially tons of people who paid money, who bought the masks, who have receipts and other details that we can use in our investigation. So we go to the Facebook group. Facebook groups, if you weren't aware, if it's public, you can look in it right away. If it has, requires you to be approved for membership, you can request to join. And once you're in that group, they now enable you to search through the content in a group. And so I simply searched for the posts with Zest Ads, and I pulled up a whole bunch. And people were just complaining nonstop about this company, and almost all of them had bought masks, although some of them had also bought drones. And so I'm starting to get the sense that this is a company that maybe is opportunistically trying to sell masks, and they're lying to people about what these masks can do. And of course, we want to go and reach out to these people, and we want to ask them to forward us their receipts that prove they purchased from Zest Ads. That's important. And the other thing that's really important to those receipts is that the receipts give us the URL of the site that they purchased from. So is it only that one URL we've seen, or are they actually running a whole bunch of stores? And then of course we can get quotes from our customers, which are going to be useful in the story, and maybe they're going to tell us about other Facebook pages they've seen. And so at this
Craig,
point,
can I just ask you, sorry to interrupt you, could I
yeah.
just ask you to slow down a tad?
Yes, sorry.
Just yeah, I think the translators are running to keep up, so thank
I
you.
understand. I tend to speak quickly, so thank you for that. So at this point, we've got some customers. We've got a company that seems to be strongly implicated in it. We've got some evidence in the form of receipts. And we know that Facebook seems to be the place where people are buying these masks. So we want to zero in on the operation of selling these masks in a misleading way. And this takes us to kind of the key network analysis part of what we want to do here. And that is, how many Facebook pages are selling these masks? How many of them might be linked to that company? At the same time, we're also interested in how many online stores they might be using to sell. And the background on that is that it's very easy to create an online store now. With Shopify or other platforms, you can get one created in minutes. And so what we've seen is a blossoming of companies that are selling products on Facebook, using Shopify as their store, and just continuing to create tons and tons of them as they mislead people or steal their money. And so what we're going to do, of course, is we get our customer receipts, so we have more store URLs. We're going to visit the stores and see if there are any similar characteristics that show other ways of identifying more stores. We're going to look on Facebook for the pages that might be linked to those stores. And then we're also going to use a who is search to figure out any domain ownership information. And the goal is to figure out how big this particular misleading mask operation is and how much money they might be making. Okay, so here's an example. We have 4 examples of online stores here that customers said to me they had purchased from. And one of the things right away, of course, I clicked on every link on the store, looked at all of the products. Every single About Us page is basically word for word the same. They just substitute in the name of that particular store. They also have these weird kind of random names: Winter Never Ends, Chill Spring, Solid Empathy. So we are clearly getting the sense that this is a kind of a large-scale operation. They're churning out lots of stores. And so the great thing about knowing that a lot of these stores have the same content on the About Us page is we can then take that About Us text, grab a couple sentences of it, put it in quotation marks, put it back into Google. And now we have results showing us lots and lots of stores. In fact, there was almost 300 results in Google. And so this is where any glamour of the investigation goes away, because we're going to do some extremely manual work. We're going to look at and visit every single one of these stores. We're going to log that in a spreadsheet. We're going to visit every Google listing of them, and we're going to try to figure out if all of these stores are the same and if they all seem to be connected to this network. So this is just boring manual work. I did it. I clicked on every store. But the manual work is really important because I really had a good feel of these stores and what they were selling and what they were doing because I saw them with my own eyes. So manual work is important. Then we've got our spreadsheet of stores. Now, how many Facebook pages were linked to these stores? So take a look at my search query that I did at the top there. Google has some specific search operators, and I used one where I did site:facebook.com and then the name of the store in quotation marks. So this search query will only search for results on Facebook, and it will only look for results where that particular URL is mentioned. So this is a great way to search Facebook using Google, and it can be very effective because Facebook search is very frustrating, okay? It gives a weird range of results. You ideally want to do both, but this is a very efficient way of doing it. And so as noted on the bottom of the slide, we're going to take all of those, and I had like close to 200 store URLs, okay? I visited every one of those, and then I did this search for every single one of those. And when I found a Facebook page that was linked to that site, I then entered that in a different spreadsheet. And of course, we looked at those Facebook pages as well. So we were learning about the stores and learning about the Facebook pages. And just to give you a sense, this is the kind of thing that I would see. So, you know, here's a Facebook page with the same name as the store. In the About section, it is listing that exact website. And that's significant because Facebook now is actually more restrictive about the URL you can put in your About section of a page. So this gives us a very clear link between this page and this store. And then of course, I also looked at the page transparency information. And in this case, we have, again, a pretty recent page. We have someone managing it in Malaysia, so not Spain. And we have the page running ads, which I could then look at. So I did this, you know, hundreds of times and learned a lot of information about it. And so again, you know, Malaysia now is of interest to us. And to make a long story short, Zest Ads is a Malaysian company. Okay, so we're starting to see more connections to Zest Ads. Here's what a bit of my spreadsheet looked like. I had one column for the Facebook pages. I had one column, you know, of where the page manager was. I had a column for the store that was linked to it. And then this last column here. If you remember, we had that confusing American company on the first page we found. So it turns out what happened is Zest Ads found a way to kind of subvert Facebook's process for adding that official confirmed page owner to mislead people. And these are the other companies that actually they had listed as the confirmed page owner on pages that were in fact being managed by Zest Ads. So they were actively misleading people. They were actively exploiting Facebook. And again, what we see is that in the end, the managers were overwhelmingly in Malaysia, which is where Zest Ads is. So we're building our connections to Zest Ads. Here is, you know, the who is search I did. So one of the last things was I took all of my URLs of the stores and I ran a who is search. And this is a search you can run. I recommend a free tool for you there in the text on the left, domainbigdata.com. You put in the web address and it will give you information about when it was registered. And if you're lucky, it will tell you who registered it, give you contact information for them, and tell you, you know, where they are. In this case, I only received partial information. And that partial information, again, listed Malaysia. So a significant number, almost all of those store websites had Malaysian information listed in their who is information. So we are, again, adding to our connections, adding to all of the evidence pointing at Zest Ads running a very large operation, misleading people to sell masks during a pandemic. And in the end, you know, obviously I did a deep dive on the company, but in the end, you know, we published the story. And of course, before publishing, we took it to Facebook and we said, you know, here's the stores, here's the pages, here's the company behind it, here is, you know, what they're doing. And the important piece of context on this is that at the time, Facebook had still banned all mask ads. And so not only were we exposing this company that was ripping people off and tricking them with false information, we also exposed that Facebook was failing to enforce its own policy. And in the end, Facebook sent the company a cease and desist letter and has completely banned it from its platforms. We'll see if they can actually keep them off. But that was the end result of this company, which had spent tens of millions of dollars on Facebook ads over the last few years, is now supposed to be completely shut down in terms of Facebook. So a quick recap for you here. Remember that we started with content. We tried to build out a network. And then we also thought about the actors. Who was behind this? In this case, Zest Ads. Those are key pieces, always. When you have a Facebook page or another kind of social media account in front of you, I really encourage you to think about every piece of it and how you can look at that and analyze it. With Google search, it's really, really effective if you know how to do some simple search operators like cite : or putting certain things in quotes to restrict your results. So always think about combining, even if you're looking at social media, sometimes Google is actually still one of your best search options for that. Who is an amazing, there are good free tools out there for trying to find information about a domain. And this technique of kind of starting with one thing and building on it is often referred to as snowballing. So remember to do that. Remember, when you start with one thing, it's probably connected to other things and other people. Try to snowball and add and do that manual work, because it will pay off. And the last thing is, this was specific to COVID. In this case, it had connections to e-commerce, but these approaches and these tools can work in any kind of investigation. And if you're interested in getting more information about other tools and approaches you can use, I do maintain this list of verification tools and tips at bit.ly/verification tools and tips. And that is an open Google Doc that I maintain, which is there and freely available to anybody. And with that, I will pass it back to you, Anne.
Thank you. That was so interesting. Thanks. And thanks for sharing all that information with everybody and updating it all the time. It's a real gold mine. I just, before I move to Jose, I just have one question for you, because of the position that you sit in looking at the world, so to speak, in the world of misinformation. And by the way, I totally take your point that these techniques and tips that you're sharing with us are entirely appropriate to non-COVID investigations, obviously. But just on the COVID misinformation or disinformation side, how do you, overall, is it much worse than you expected? When you look at it globally, or from wherever you're sitting globally, actually, do you, how big a problem is this? I mean,
I think it's, if we were to think about what is the biggest global disinformation event that has happened in the internet era, I think this is probably it. And so it is massive. In a sense, it's probably, we should expect it to be like that, because how often do we have events like this that are life and death, that are spreading through almost every country in the world, and that really have a tremendous dangerous impact and have fear and uncertainty and complicated medical information built into it. So it is a massive global event. It is a massive global challenge. And I think one of the things people should keep in mind is that wherever you are in the world, there might be people in your country who see this as an opportunity to really seize upon and get their message out. So anti-vaccine communities, other types of extremists, they're trying to ride the wave of COVID interest and COVID fear in order to kind of seize upon it and move people to their point of view, in order to undermine authorities, in order to reach goals that they have. And so I think it's an incredibly significant global event, and the amount and the complexity and the just constant nature of the mis and disinformation is in a lot of ways kind of unprecedented.
Thank you, Craig. I'm sure we'll have questions. And by the way, just to remind the audience that you can ask your questions in the Q&A box, and please, you can ask them anytime. So, go ahead now. Before I hand over now to Jose, welcome. And I think you've got slides as well.
Yes, and thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I thank you and the GIJN, the interpreters. Craig, your presentation was fascinating. I'm just sharing my screen right now. And here we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I just want to start by presenting some basic information on Brazil. I don't know if you're familiar with the country. So we have a population of about 200 million people. What is important is that the Constitution states that health is a right for everyone, okay, and a duty from the state, We do have a national health system. It's called Sistema Único de Saúde, which is a unique system of health. It was built after the military dictatorship and was enshrined in the 1908 Constitution. We consider that this system it's flawed but fair. Three quarters of the population, they do have they only use the national health system for everything they have. 1/4 of the population uses the private sector, which in this pandemic, they are the local authorities are trying to make these two systems work together. Okay, that's the idea. In some states, the governors, they asked for intensive care units in private hospitals that were empty, that could be used by the whole population, just to give some information about how this works. Here we have some information about COVID-19 in Brazil. As you know, Brazil is only behind the United States in the number of cases and number of deaths. These are the numbers from yesterday. I just updated them. But we still have to consider that Brazil is one of the countries that is doing, we are doing few tests, okay? That's a problem that the authorities, they can't deal with this problem despite the heavy criticism. We also have to consider underreporting, that we have many cases that are not appearing on the statistics. Also, we have to consider, to understand these numbers, we have a high proportion of informal work, so it's impossible to a big part of the society to do social distancing because they have to work. That's one of the tragedies of this the situation that we live in. The statistics show that at least 7% of the Brazilian population live in what we call subnormal clusters, which are slums and other types of residences. Okay, they are mainly we have 5 or 7, 10 people living in the same room, which is, of course, as you know, a big problem. Also, we have a big conflict between federal authorities and state authorities. You know, like in the United States, in Brazil, health is an issue that the governors have to deal with, but at the same time, the federal government sustains the unique health, the national health system. So that's a problem that we have, because the president of Brazil and the state governors, they have different views of what should be done. Well, Jair Bolsonaro, which some people call him a tropical Donald Trump, this comparison is, of course, in some parts correct. Here, and on the left side, I'm listing some of the responses of the federal government. Well, from the beginning, the president tried to minimize the pandemic, saying it was just a little flu, of course. He accused the state governors of trying to politicize a health issue, of corruption. He was arguing that these state governors were using this the situation to steal money to steal public money. Okay, it's important here to know that he was elected in 2018 with a platform against corruption, which was or is a big problem in Brazil. He tried to force the reopening of the economy. He was barred by the Supreme Court of Brazil. And during the pandemic, he lost 2 of his health ministers. Both of them left this position because of Bolsonaro's approach to hydroxychloroquine. So he chose to put an active duty general in the health ministry. He's, I think, for the last 2 months, this general is an interim, but of course he's changing everything. There's an ongoing militarization of the health ministry. You know, of the many bureaucracies that Brazil have, the health system, the health ministry bureaucracy is very well known and well considered by the population, but now the main positions in the ministry are filled with active duty officers, okay, from the army specifically. So this militarization of the health ministry is connected with some attempts to manipulate data. Of course, the government denies this, but here on the right side, I can show you the what we call the scoreboard of life, you know, placar da vida. It is released by the government's communication department without the number of deaths. Okay, so that's the official communication of Brazilian government. Below, you can see the coronavirus panel, where the government shows the number of cases and of deaths. As you can see, the government is using lower cases. Sorry, I just they are using lower cases and smaller cases to show the number of deaths than the number of recovered people. Okay, so that's just Orwellian stuff that is going on. So Brazil is obviously affected by this disinformation campaign. It's both official and unofficial. I'll show you all of this. And just to give an example, 2 weeks ago, Bolsonaro encouraged his followers to invade field hospitals and film them empty, to show that the state governors were using public money just to show off these field hospitals. And what happened is that at one day after Bolsonaro made this comment, people really invaded field hospitals and tried to film empty stretches there to supposedly comprove a corruption scandal. Okay. So now I'm turning to what is Comprova. As Anne said, Comprova, now I just want to show what this means in Portuguese. You know, the word Comprova comes from the verb comprovar, which is to prove. So if we're saying that he proves or she proves, it means we would say in Portuguese, ela comprova or ele comprova. Also, if we separate the word comprova, it means with proof, okay? So this is our website. In 2019, we verified content about public policy. In 2020, we are verifying content on COVID-19. And just last week, we started to verify content on public policy again, okay? So it is a coalition that of news outlets that was created in 2018 to work during the presidential elections. It was facilitated by First Draft. In Brazil, as Anne said, it is coordinated by the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism. The model that we are using was tested in the French national elections in 2017. And it is working pretty well in Brazil because we do have competitors in this coalition, but in this case, they work together. We are able to do this, and it's working for the readers and for the outlets. Okay. At this point, we have 28 outlets, 3 editors connected to Abrage, and multiple reporters working from these outlets. One of the main feature of Comprova is that no one works alone. Okay, so each verification has at least 2 reporters from different outlets. So before this verification is published, 3 other outlets that didn't participate in the verification, they have to cross-check this verification. Okay. So now I'm just a quick slide to show you how disinformation on COVID-19 is happening in Brazil. A significant part of the content is originate from pages and supposedly outlets that exist. You know, there's this ecosystem of disinformation in Brazil. We have many pages and on the internet. They emulate real newspapers. No, they are not considered real outlets, but they emulate this and they question the mainstream press, and they say that they are writing what is true. Okay, and they have lots of readers, of course. Also, and many of these pages are connected to the networks of government supporters. Okay, we have cases of Bolsonaro and his sons and some MPs on the chamber that share content from this website. So it's a big problem. Okay, this content, this disinformation content, is used in various ways. Okay, you know, attacks on the WHO, attacks on China, magic cures in which the chloroquine is the main one, attempts to minimize the pandemic. You know, at this at the right side, you can see some of the content that were published in the last months. You know, there was an accusation that in Manaus, which is in the Amazon, people were mourning the pillow, you know, that it was a fake casket. So that's one of the things that we verified. Below, another, it's an image of a protest not connected to COVID-19 that was used to show purportedly what was a fake, the fake deaths. Okay. There's also attacks on governors, like I mentioned earlier, attacks on social isolation. So that's some of the strategies that are being used here. Now I'm going to show you this case study. It is a video. I'm not going to show the video because it's in Portuguese, but here we received this information from a reader. No, he sent to us through WhatsApp. It was posted on YouTube. We are verifying lots of contents from YouTube. You know? So what the title means there is urgent, watch before it's deleted. You know, these guys are always denouncing the platforms, Twitter, Facebook. They say they are conspiring against the president and against Brazil, and they want to delete the content that they upload. Okay, so what he's saying that the WHO is responsible for the dictatorial decrees of the governors who screwed Brazilian people. No, sorry for the words, but that's what he's saying. Now in this page, he shows there's a video inside that video. You know, just let me go back. This guy, he's a YouTuber, and he starts his video, and then he shows another video which is narrated in Spanish by probably an Argentinian guy. And what is saying that above is saying, wake up Brazil, below, you are being manipulated. No? Then the video, then he shows this video narrated in Spanish that the person says that he is in Geneva, in Switzerland, which is the headquarters of the WHO, and shows what is people gathering in the sun without using masks and without social distancing measures. Okay, and then he says, corrupt communist governments are using this narrative of the pandemic to steal. They don't care about this pandemic because they know that this pandemic is a scam. No, so this is one of the videos that alleges that we are living in a moment of scam. There's no pandemic. So from now, I just want to show you step by step how we verify this content. Okay, so the first thing that we did, we used this tool called Invid. There's a very good Chrome extension. I encourage you to use it. This tool, it breaks the video into frames and allows you to do a Google search on top of the images. You know? So you can choose different frames of the video and do different searches on Google, and then you can reach the original content. That's our idea, always to try to find the original content. You know? The result of this, the use of this tool is that we could find the same video used in Argentinian and Spanish sites and profiles on social media. Okay, so there's a here in Comprova since 2018, we can see clearly that there is an international connection of disinformation. Many of the contents that are used in Brazil, they come from other countries, especially the United States. Okay. Of course, we try to contact all these websites, but they didn't respond. So that part of the verification ended there. Well, the second step is to use Google Maps, a very easy tool to use. It's available to everyone. So how we decided to use Google Maps, this was illuminated by what we read on the comments made on YouTube. Okay, one of the users, the readers, or he wrote on the comment section that this guy was in this place. I don't know the correct pronunciation in French, but I think it's Bain de Paquis. It's a very famous tourist attraction in Geneva. So we started we try to find this place on Google Maps and also on Google, searching with the video. Okay. So we were able to confirm that the images shown there were images from Geneva, from this place, this specific place. Okay, the first thing that we did is just normal journalistic work. You know, this like Craig mentioned, the manual work. You know, this this old school journalism, it's still very useful. You know, we can't get rid of this. This is our main tool. This is our main tool, journalism. Okay, so the reporters, they contacted two hotel receptionists in the region, two hotels in the Bain de Paquis area, and both of them attested that there was intense movement in the area and that everything was functioning very normal. So with this information, we know, well, this video is probably real because this situation is really happening at this point in Switzerland. So let's move forward. Now, this is an example of how we use it, Google Maps. On the left side, there is an image from the video, a frame from the video. And on the right side, an image that is available on Google Maps. So you can see from the rooftops that we are looking at the same area. So that was true. This guy, this Argentinian or Spaniard guy, he was really in Geneva, probably. Okay. And then we could establish also using Google Maps that this area, this Bain de Paquis, is not very close to the WHO headquarters, which is like 4 kilometers away. Why we did this search? Because at the video, the guy at a certain point, he's showing people, you know, in Geneva, and then he said, "This is the WHO headquarters." There's an attempt to say that one of the buildings that he's showing is the headquarters of the WHO. With this verification, we just show that this was not the case. Okay. Then there's at the middle of our work, there was a problem. No, we couldn't find the original source of the video, which is a problem. We couldn't find the narrator who uploaded the video at the first place. Also, we could not prove that the video was actually made on June 1st, which was the date that he was saying that he was recording that. So the alternative that we try to follow is to try to verify if that video was really recorded in Geneva at this date. So here I want to show you a third tool, which is Wolfram Alpha. Well, this tool does several things, but one of the things that it does, it can establish, for example, the weather at a certain city on a certain day. I encourage you to use this in your city to know how this works, because it might be useful on some of the verifications. So we did a simple search, just weather, Geneva, June 1st, 2020. And then that's the result that we have, okay? We can see it was a warm day with an 18 degrees Celsius average, partly cloud, but few clouds. So, well, we can say that at the day that this guy alleges that he was recording in Geneva, there was it was a sunny day, so we could believe, we could understand that this was probably real. Okay, so let's move forward. Then we used another tool called SunCalc. That's the website. I encourage you to use this. What is important is to try to use these tools when you don't need them, because when you need them, you have some time to learn how to use. So I encourage you to use, for example, to check how was the weather yesterday on your city. It will be easy to understand the function of these tools. Okay, so it helps to find the position of the sun at a certain time of the day. I'll show you how we did this. This is useful because we could use the shadows that appear in the video to establish the time when this recording was made. So this is one of the frames of the video that we are verifying. Okay, and then we could use Google Maps again to try to find the exact place where it was recorded. So again, on the left side, we have a frame from the video, and on the right side, an image from Google Maps. As you can see, this building is very easily identifiable. On one of the floors, we have two yellow awnings. So when we could find this image on Google Maps, we could establish the exact place and the direction that the guy who made the recording was at that time. Okay, so you can see with the red arrow exactly the place where he was. You know, the Bain de Paqui area. He was not exactly on the Bain de Paqui, but he was on the street. You know. And then we could use, again, the SunCalc. As you can see, I put the red circle exactly on the same place that the guy was. And then to have the shadows in the pattern that we are seeing there, we would, the sun would have to be behind these buildings. So using SunCalc, we try to find the sun on that day in Geneva at that very specific point, and then we could move the sun to know where at what time he would have to be in that position to produce those kind of shadows. So we could establish that it was between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m., probably at around 6 p.m. So that's what we were able to do. So we couldn't establish we couldn't find the original source. We couldn't find the guy that recorded the video, but we could establish that the things that he was saying were probably real. Okay, so what the next step, again, very important, journalistic tools, you know, this old school journalism. the YouTuber was omitting two important issues. The first thing is that the pandemic hit Switzerland before Brazil, and that the European country underwent 8 weeks of restrictive measures on social isolation. Okay? After that, the government started reopening the economy and social life. That's why in June, we could see those images in Switzerland. And the other thing, which is pretty obvious, but we should be clear, is that the WHO, it doesn't have jurisdiction on Switzerland, not even in Geneva, where it's headquartered. So we needed to explain this to our readers doing just basic interviews and showing some data. You know, like for example, we entered the WHO website to show what is the purpose of this institution, when it was created, who controls the WHO, what is its objective. So this is pretty much a straightforward thing that we needed to do. So the conclusion that we arrived is that the Geneva agglomeration video is real, because we could establish that it was probably filmed at that point, at that date that the guy was saying. But it does not prove that the pandemic is a scam. No, so there's an interesting thing that at the beginning of Comprova in 2018, we used to refrain from entering this, what we call in Portuguese, these narrative debates. You know, we wanted to be very clear. Let's stick to the facts. But then, you know, Comprova is not the only one, the only initiative verifying content in Brazil. So what we could see is that these networks of disinformation, they were upgrading and updating their practices, and this idea of creating false narratives was especially relevant for them. And we also, as a consequence of this, we also could we also needed to enter this narrative debate, and this is an example of this. You know, we could establish that the video was real, but it's not enough for us to say that the video is real, because we show that the video is being used in a way that is dangerous for society, because the pandemic is not a scam, so it's killing people. So that's the idea. I think I'm finishing. Just stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Give back to you, Anne.
Great, thank you. Very interesting. It's very interesting, your last point about needing to intervene in the narrative as well as show the facts and disprove the misinformation and so on. It takes it to a different level. I think it's extremely interesting that you've got 28 organizations working together, organizations that normally are competitors with each other, or to some extent at least competitors. It's both things are absolutely fascinating, and the amount of work you have to do is just huge. So thanks, that was really interesting. And I'm sure there's questions also for Craig. And Eunice has joined us now. I think we've got a few round of questions from the audience, Eunice, don't we? Eunice, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the first one is more general. How do you recognize disinformation? What are the big red flags and the signs that you usually look out for before you investigate it? And the second one is, how rampant is disinformation on Instagram? Do you have any tips on investigating disinformation on Instagram? And the third one for this round, with fact checkers and researchers doing the debunking work, should investigative journalists be focusing on the trolls and coordination behind this information? Does any of the speakers have one or two great examples from the developing world?
Okay, so why don't we give both of you a chance? Do you want to kick off? Craig, did you catch those three questions? Okay, please.
Yeah, so in terms of recognizing disinformation, one of the things that you'll often see, and Jose actually gave a good example in his presentation, is there's often an appeal to emotion. So it's often an extreme claim, or it is something that is meant to make people angry, or that is meant to sort of align with existing biases or beliefs. So look for extreme language and stuff that is oriented towards emotion. And in Jose's example, you know, the guy was like, watch this before YouTube takes it down, you know? So again, that's kind of extreme language where people are really trying to kind of hack the attention of people to get them to pay attention to it. So that's one piece to look at. The second thing about Instagram, yes, it is pervasive on Instagram because Instagram has been really popular with influencers in areas like health and fashion. You see a connection between the types of content that is already popular on Instagram and the types of mis and disinformation that you'd find there. So a lot of health misinformation is there, but it's also a place that people feel is a little more intimate and less public than Facebook. So you see people sharing it in large degree there because they feel like it's a more private environment. So Instagram is absolutely worth looking at. And the other last thing I would just say on Instagram is, you know, there are posts and there are stories, and the stories are only viewable for a certain amount of time in some cases. I encourage you to strongly remember to pay attention to stories as well as posts. Look at people's stories and capture them because they may disappear. And some people use that nature of the temporary element of stories to actually push out false information and then to try and have it disappear to hide their tracks. So Instagram is definitely a place to be looking, and it's tough to search on Instagram. So remember my tip about site:/instagram.com as a Google search, and also look for hashtags on Instagram because it's not as easy to search natively on Instagram as other places.
Great, and then there was one more. Do you want to just hit the third one, the third question on whether investigative journalists should focus on trolling?
Trolls.
Yeah, on the trolls.
Yes. So I do think one part of this work is pushing back against the false information that is misleading people and giving people access to good quality factual information. So pushing back against the false stuff, giving them good stuff. The other part, which relates to this question, is I think we have a responsibility to expose the people and the groups who are helping create and spread this kind of information. And so yes, troll groups, you know, state actors, financially driven actors, I think all of these need to be investigated. And one of the reasons is, one, it's a good investigation to do, but two, it helps deter people. It helps it make it less appealing if they know that they're going to be exposed, and if they know that journalists are paying attention to what they're doing. So I think it is important.
Great, thanks. Jose, would you like to add to that? You need to unmute yourself, please.
Yes, I completely agree with everything that Craig said. I just wanted to add about this thing about recognizing content. More than recognizing use, what is very important to Comprova is where to find content to debunk. So at this point, we rely a lot on our readers. We have an active WhatsApp number that people can reach us. Other initiatives like Comprova in Brazil, they also rely a lot on the readers to send them content to be debunked. You know, of course, you know, we are in our third year, so we have we have tools to monitor the web, like for example CrowdTangle, that we can use them to see what is going on these networks. You know, at this point in the third year, we are able to see a lot. Of course, we can't see everything; no one can, but we are able to see a lot. So I think this about what I wanted to say is that more important than recognizing is trying to find content, because as soon as you are able to see what's going on, you will be able to recognize, because there is a kind of pattern. And of course, there is this, as I mentioned, there is this international network, but at the same time, we can see some specific stuff that happens only in Brazil, and I believe this is the reality in Argentina, in Ghana, in Netherlands, and all other places. And about Instagram, we also have already debunked content on Instagram. In 2020, we are very focused on YouTube. It's incredible. That was not the case in 2018, but in 2020, YouTube is the main platform that we are verifying right now. And the third question is about the networks. I agree with Craig, but in the case of Comprova, it's like it's a coalition of people from different newsrooms. That is, it works because it's extremely focused on doing one thing, that is verifying and debunking content. I believe these investigations should be done, but at least in the case of Brazil, this is a job for the other parts of the newsrooms. No, that's not the objective of Comprova. That's not the point of this project. But of course, this is being done in Brazil. At this point, this is being done by federal authorities also. The Supreme Court is investigating this network. They are getting close to Bolsonaro's supporters. And I think last week, 11 MPs were investigated because they were financing protests, anti-democratic protests. And there is also an investigation, an ongoing and parallel investigation about this, what we call in Brazil, it's not a good term, but the fake news network. So I believe this is extremely important, because when we are able to show how they work, how they profit from it, this might help people to be aware that we have, like Craig mentioned in UN, that we have a disinformation disorder.
Good, thank you for that. Eunice, we have another round, I believe, more than another, but one more for now of questions.
Yes, I think this first one is for Craig, because Alexandra saw that the Facebook page which made you start the Zest Ads investigation had only 16 likes. So she's asking, what made you spend so much energy on a company that seems at first to have such a small impact? Is it because they have an activated advertisement for mass? Another question for Craig. Your case study was on a commercial scammer, but isn't most of the disinformation from governments? What percentage of disinformation from state actors would you estimate? Are there any great tools to explore this? And the next questions are for Jose.
Maybe we'll come back to you, Eunice, because we might lose track of the questions. So yeah, can you hang on one moment? Craig, you've got two there. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, a good question. That initial page that I showed, it's true, had very few likes, and the post itself didn't have a huge amount of engagement. But when I saw it, I was aware that Facebook had banned mask ads, and I had been interested in sort of people evading that. So I was already sort of attuned to look at mask ads and who was behind them. But the thing I think to note about it, which goes bigger than this one, is if you know how to use these approaches and tools, you can just sort of spend minutes or maybe an hour looking at something a little bit more to know whether it's worth spending more time. So even if I see one page that doesn't instantly have a lot of fans and not a lot of engagement on a post, it may be part of a larger network, and it's worth spending a little bit of time to see, okay, is this content being shared elsewhere as well? Who is behind it, and do they have a larger network? So I didn't discount it right away, because I knew that might just be kind of that tip of the iceberg. So that's the first one. The second one about state disinformation. So, I mean, it's a complicated answer, because there are absolutely some places in the world where state disinformation is without question the dominant type. And so depending on where you are, that may absolutely be the case. There are other parts of the world where actually financially driven false and misleading information is a very big kind of business appeal. So that can be significant, and where also just kind of passionate partisans, people who are really committed to a particular political point of view, or who, in the case of health misinformation, maybe are, say, anti-vaccine. So it depends on where you are. And in terms of measuring it, you know, again, you're going to have to think about who is closely monitoring the particular country or region that you're interested in. And so, you know, are there fact checkers operating in your region already? And what kind of stuff are they seeing? I guess a general rule might be the more open and democratic a particular society is that you're in, the less likely that you're going to see the state-sponsored disinformation dominate, and the more likely you might see the financially driven, the partisan-driven, you know, the personal opinion-driven stuff go. So it is, you know, it depends on your context and where you are.
Thank you. Eunice, the two questions or one question for Jose?
Yes, but I think because Jose mentioned the in-vid video verification tool, and someone is asking whether there are any other tools to verify video, and is there any other way to monitor YouTube for viral videos besides using keyword searches? And the other question is, what are the lessons of Brazil for the rest of the world? What has Comprova learned about how to cope with this flood of misinformation? Oh, and the last one, how many fact checks can you realistically do in a week?
Okay, thank you, Jose.
So about the number of fact checks, you know, in Comprova we can do a lot because it's a coalition. So since we have 28 outlets, we are able to do a lot. But this, of course, we don't have you know, the reporters, they can spend the amount of time that they need to be sure about the verification. So we don't have I believe in a good week, or in a good week in like in terms of our work, we can probably publish 8 to 10 verifications in a week. Okay, but this also depends on the speed that the reporters can be sure about their job. About YouTube, this, as I mentioned, that we are verifying lots of contents from YouTube. At this point, we rely a lot on the readers. You know, it's every day when I enter the WhatsApp number to see what the readers are sending to us, we see like 5 or 10 links to YouTube videos that were not on our monitoring tools. So that this shows that we are not able to see everything, but the readers are, and what they see they send to us. So it's very difficult to monitor YouTube. So at this point, I don't know if I can ask my colleagues to see if we are able to, we have other tools to monitor YouTube, but at this point we of course we'll rely on the specific words or the content that the users are sending to us. I believe.
And then there was one last one. By the way, if the person in the audience asking the question is interested, GIJN actually has a tip sheet on how to verify video with some of the tools mentioned by Jose, but also some other ones. So that might be of interest. The last question was on lessons from Brazil. Quite a big question, but maybe a good question to start to end the webinar, because we're running out of time. It's a good question for sure.
Well, I think from this journalistic point of view, that collaboration can be very useful, because what I forgot to mention is that the content that Comprova publishes is available to everyone, even the outlets that don't participate in Comprova. No, small outlets from small cities, they can use this content if they want. So what we can see that using collaboration, we can do much more than if each outlet was trying to work on their own. So I think that's the big lesson. I know it sounds counterintuitive. At the beginning, no one believed that it would be Comprova would be able to do this. When we talk to people from other countries, they tend to doubt what we are saying. But if you can arrange this coalition, it will be very useful, because it will optimize the work in a very good way.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you. Eunice, we had one last one, didn't we? And then we're running out of time, but it was a question. Yeah.
Yes, actually, someone else squeezed in one question.
Oh, okay.
So that's two. Okay.
Yeah.
This journalist Ahmed is asking, some countries, the state actors, they're narrowing down and limiting the information that journalists can access. So how can a journalist investigate misinformation in such countries? And the last question, can you give some examples of the significant impacts of these reports after you flagged this false and misleading COVID-19 related posts online, the impact?
Okay, so maybe we could start again with you, Jose, on the narrowing of the space of information and how to work it, given that you're working in that kind of context, and you know how you work in that context. Any advice you could give?
Well, again, in the case of Comprova, we are focused on user-generated content. So, but sometimes we have to deal with information that only some part of the state has. For example, the army. In Brazil, in some parts of the country, the army is building roads. So last year we had to try to debunk videos that were purposely showing the army building roads in certain places, and we needed to stop the verification process at this point, because we couldn't get the information from the army. In some instances we could, but in other instances we could not. So that's the idea here is to try to circumvent these blocks that the government puts, but it's not easy. It's not easy. As Craig mentioned, when you have a more democratic country, of course it will be easier. What is important is that the civil society is aware of the possibility that the government is blocking information, and that every move that is done to reduce access is it has to be met with protests and comments, and that you can't do this. You have to try to block the government from doing this. But of course, this is not the environment is very different for journalists in each country. So it's probably easier to, despite the fact that Brazil is in a very bad shape right now, and even Brazilian democracy is in a bad shape, it's probably easier for me to say this than to other people in other places. So just
it's all relative. Yes, thank you very much for that. And Craig, finally, the question that we got about overall impact. When you published your story, all the other stories that you're working on, can you make a dent?
Yeah, I mean, so you can, and there's usually sort of a few general areas where that happens. But I'll also say off the top that you do at times feel like you're playing whack-a-mole. And I don't know how well that translates into the various languages, but the idea is you knock down one operation, you knock down one false claim, and a bunch of others pop up. And that is just the nature of this work. And if you're going to be frustrated by that, you're probably going to have a tough time staying in this particular area, because these, you know, when you talk about social media, there's so much content, and these platforms do not have a full handle on what is present there. And so as much as you knock out bad actors, you know, there is still going to be problems there. So that is the realistic piece of this. The second part is in terms of impact. Well, one, if you know you're exposing people in what they're doing, sometimes they have a reputational impact. Maybe they lose the other job they had, and maybe they're just known forever as somebody who was trying to spread, you know, say sell scammy products, spread false information. So there can be an impact on the bad actor. Then there's the platforms themselves. With Zest ads, obviously they took legal action. Facebook took legal action and sent Zest ads a letter and banned them from the platform. And that means Facebook won't be taking any more money from them. That means the customers who were getting ripped off, hopefully will not be getting, new ones won't be getting ripped off, at least through Facebook. So the platform, the impact you can often see is the platforms taking action, changing their policies, removing bad actors, that kind of thing. And then the last one is sometimes you actually also get governments involved where they might open an investigation into a particular operation. And so those are kind of generally the things you see. But, you know, for me, the big impact I'm always trying to think of is, are we helping increase the amount of quality information, reduce the amount of bad actors, reduce the amount of bad information? And that is a constant battle. But every time, you know, you do a debunk or you remove a bad actor, you notch a little bit of a win. And so you have to take those small victories. Otherwise, to be honest, like, you can find yourself discouraged, especially if you are in an authoritarian situation where you feel like you are up against the full weight of the state. That is, you know, a very difficult position to be in.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that comment. And I'm sorry that we don't have time to answer any more of the questions. We'll be sending more material out tomorrow. And I think it's been a fantastic webinar. And I wanted to thank everyone involved. My GIJN colleagues, the translators, all working hard behind the scenes to catch up with how fast we're all talking. Thank you all very much. I want to thank everyone in the audience for attending. It's great to have you here, and I really want to thank both our speakers, Craig and Jose, for really interesting contributions, and we hope to invite them back again soon. So thanks, everyone. Before I say goodbye, I just wanted to flag up next week's webinar, same time, same place. It's on following the pandemic money in Africa. So that will be a week today, and then 2 weeks today, we are focusing on how to survive as a freelance journalist. And those two are the ones coming up. So watch our Twitter feed and our website and so on. And again, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and goodbye.